Hello and welcome to Center for Victory's podcast of Your Best Day Yet. Here at Center for Victory, we're here to help unlock, reinforce, and enrich relationships through personal and professional development. I am Eric Guy, Chief Victory Officer at the Center for Victory. With me today is a longtime friend and chum, Ms. Loriann Putzier, President and co-founder of IntegraCare Corporation. She's going to lay it down for us today. This is one classy lady, and this month we are talking about Wonder Women. And when I think about that, you are like top of mind.
Thank you.
And I'm not just saying that because I'm here blowing smoke, but you know that I mean that because you are extremely classy in what you do, and you've created a great environment for people to work and live. And so we're going to get into it a little bit, maybe just about your background, who you are, what you do. A little bit I kind of introduced you, but like tell our listeners and God, what do you do? I mean, what do you think you do?
Okay. Well, what I think I do, you have a day. But effectively, I am what I would say is a chief people officer.
Yes.
And that's really what makes our business tick. However, I come from a human resources background and got into senior living by way of human resources. And actually, when I started in senior living, I was hired by somebody, a firm in Pittsburgh, one of the largest in the country, who had never had human resources. And so the challenge was, what they said to me is, we don't believe in human resources, but we have all these unemployment claims, workers' comp claims, discrimination complaints, and if you can work on those for a year and demonstrate to us that you're saving us more than you're costing us with your wages and benefits, we will let you build out an HR department. So that's my foray into senior living, and
Wow.
I was able to do that. And actually, since they had nothing, I have to say it was actually easy, which probably one of the only easy things in my career. But I loved the industry, loved senior living, and 8 years later, left that firm with my partner Rick Irwin, and we started IntegraCare. So for the time we've had IntegraCare, I've primarily been operations.
Okay.
The COO. However, we currently have a successor for our company, and as a result of that, we're all moving positions, and I will be moving back to be the Chief People Officer of the company. So for me, it's going to be very cool to be able to end my career where I started it, on the things I love the most, which really are the talent, the leadership, the development of people, the mentoring, and the making it a great place to work.
And you do a great job at that. So what did it take, or what did you have to do to get into the position that you're in, if you could?
Well,
we got a little bit of the story, but
yes.
What else did you?
Well, a couple things. I think number one, it takes some courage. I had a decent salary, and so did my business partner. And at that time in my life, my husband and I needed my salary and his salary, and my business partner, he was the only salary. So being willing to say, we're going to walk away with nothing, and because we believe in ourselves enough to start this business. So it was the courage, number one. I think number two, the support of my spouse, because at that time, we were selling our home, and we were building a home that was a stretch for us. Before we resigned from our former employer. And my husband was speaking in Atlanta, and we were on our way to Atlanta, and when we landed, we got a call on the plane that our house sale had fallen through. The new house was under construction, and we were making the payments, and I had already made my decision that I was going to be talking to my husband about quitting my job. So I was fearful to even say to him, I want to quit my job. And so I practiced in front of the mirror, honey, I want to start my own business. And when I finally did it, we went out for dinner, and I had it all planned. And he immediately said, I support that without even questioning it. I would bet all of our eggs on you because I know you'll be successful. Yeah. So having that confidence of my spouse has been a huge motivator for me. And I think thirdly, my father was a never quit. I mean, he, even to the end of his life, was that way. He just would reinvent himself over and over again. And there were times I would think, why doesn't he just give it up?
Yeah.
And as I got older, I began to realize how much of that was really what made him tick and why people wanted to be around him, what was attractive about him as a human being and a business owner. And I realized that those are the very things I like about being in business. And so the influence of him has been in my life every step of the way. Different path, not an educated man, blue collar man.
Yeah.
Owned a packing house, nothing glamorous, but the principles are still the same.
Very good. What would you say are or have been your biggest challenges? And speak to that because we're talking about women this month. Speak to more of especially being a woman. Were there any challenges?
There haven't been as many challenges being a woman because it is a female-dominated business.
Mm-hmm.
Senior living is, independent, assisted living, memory care. People tend to think of the caregiver, who's generally a woman. So what comes as a result of that is there are women in the C-suite of our industry. I believe for me the challenges really have been for us is that we were using other people's money. So we needed institutional capital to grow our business, and we were a very small regional firm at a time when all the Brookdales, the Sunrises, the Emerituses, the biggies were dominating the industry. So, it was my partner and I and one other person. It was kind of like the Rick and Loriann show. How do we get that money to come to invest in us, to partner with us when you have all these big players with great track records? So it became about the credible relationships that we established, the knowledge of the intricacies of the business, not the big picture, everybody's going to move to senior living someday, but how do you make this tick? How do you motivate the workers? What do you do different to differentiate your product? So the struggle was finding our way to create our own vision of what those things were in a way that it was going to be attractive to capital players that typically would invest in larger operators. Mm-hmm. And then secondly, it's the talent. Because when you're a small company, if you get great people, they want to know what's the career path for them.
Right.
And we knew we were not going to be growing by 20 or 30 communities a year, maybe one or two or three. Three would be a lot. Mm-hmm. So we made an intentional decision to offer the advantages of a large company, such as the leadership training, the supporting of certifications, the mentoring opportunities for some of the leaders in the company, so that it would feel like they had the advantages that they might have in a Sunrise, in our small company. But by doing that, what we really did was say, our management company is not going to make any money, mm-hmm. and we're okay with that. In other words, it's going to break even because the money we're spending is going to bring value at the site level, and that's really where the value is created for the customer and the team. So that's been a struggle. I mean, it's rewarding. We have some great people, but if I look back and say what has been difficult, it has been winning that talent, and for me, because of my role in the company, the pressure to develop and retain the talent.
Okay. And then speak to this. What do you think have been your greatest triumphs or successes throughout life? And it just doesn't have to be at work; it can be anywhere. But what have been some of your big ones for you? Because I know you've had a lot.
There's several. They're actually kind of an interesting. I think number one, my personal life, my relationship with my husband and my family is great. In this world, I see so many people who are estranged from their families, or are single moms with 4 kids or whatever. And I have had the blessing of all of my personal relationships, which really have advanced me in my career. I believe, secondly, I would say that I have always been, I don't know why this is, but I'm not a person who's threatened by other people's knowledge or talents. So I have always been willing to hire people who I thought were much better than me. Mm-hmm. And in my role today, everybody that surrounds me is much better than me at what they do. which has always afforded me the ability to do what I am good at and what I love. And the virtue of the collection of us is it can be pretty impressive because we're not all threatened by each other. We respect the other person's talents and we're willing to say, this is your lane, take it over. And we call it the greater than yourself concept.
Uh-huh.
And, there are times when it gets a little crowded in there because it's very strong people. But overall, I think through the tough times, I've been able to have clarity because I'm not worried about trying to do every single thing operationally, for instance, because I have Megan, she's my COO, she's better on the regulations, she's better on the policies and procedures. So why do I need to do that stuff? I can just have her do that, it's what she loves, and then I work on the relational aspect. How are we going to roll that out? How are we going to get the buy-in? How are we going to monitor it? And between the two of us, we end up with something really cool. Yeah. So that's number two. And I think the last thing is, I guess one of the greatest triumphs is that we've been able to grow this business into Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia. We've been able to win over some of the institutional capital that are the biggest players in our industry, and that we are known for transparency, a solid operation, and bringing value to our team members. And therefore we call it a great place to work because it's a great place to live. Mm-hmm. And certainly we've had our share of unhappy, workers who've left or whatever. But we were laser focused on that. And when I see the needle moving on those kinds of things, and I see somebody's life improving because of that, that's the triumph. And actually that's what motivates me to keep doing it, is when you're surrounded by great people, working hard, self-sacrificing, then as the leader, you want to be doing those same things, but only at a higher level, so you're paving a great path for the workforce.
One of the things I really appreciate about you, and I hope I've told you this enough that you've heard it, is you're not one of those leaders. Like everybody thinks that leaders need to be like just aggressive and assert yourself. You're like this ray of sunshine when you walk in the room, and I love seeing you all the time. You bring a smile to my face every time I see you. There's not one time I can think of where I have, like right now. I mean, you're just like, that is who you are, and you really believe in your people. And some people say, well, you can't be a leader if you don't assert yourself, be aggressive, be confrontational. You have a whole different approach, and it's nice. It feels good.
Thank you. I greatly appreciate that.
And I don't know if you could speak to that a little bit and tell our listeners a little bit about that. But you've made a career. You haven't changed, and you've always been very people centric. You've always had this ray of sunshine about you. How has that helped? Just you being, because that's who you are. I know that's who you are. I've been, we've hung out enough that I know you are. That is who you are in your whole being. How has that impacted you, just being your authentic self?
Well, I believe in general, it kind of for me is not believe it or not, it's not a conscious decision. Yeah. It is, obviously, transparency is a pretty freeing approach to life, and non-transparency is not, game playing. There's no time for game playing. And, when I think about early in my career, I was young and green, and, you're a product of all the influencers you had. And as I mentioned, my father was one of my greatest influencers, and he was one of the most transparent people that probably I will ever know. And secondly, we're all people. We all put our pants on every day. We all have our own unique talents. And I think working specifically in human services, but in this industry, in senior living, you realize how tough every aspect of what we do is. And all people want is to be valued and respected for what they do. And even at my station in life, when I get a little note card from somebody that says they appreciated something I did, or, thank you for the initiative of the company that did such and such for my family and I still feel as good about that note as I did when I started my career right out of college. And so having that attitude has allowed us, me specifically, to know when things are not well in the company, to know you know, something happened regulatory wise in a site, or a resident family is very ticked off because we didn't take care of somebody the way we should have, or we didn't follow through, because people are not afraid to tell us those things. And the reason I believe that is they've seen that there's not always going to be punishment because you commit a mistake, and we're approachable, and that we're not, you know, we only want perfection out there in the world, so don't come and talk to us unless what you have to tell us is good news. So for me, it's been just a freeing way of existing, and actually I enjoy everybody that I work with. So if I didn't have that, you know, when people say it's lonely at the top, it doesn't have to be. It can be actually very enjoyable, but it's based on what you put into your relationships.
Mm-hmm. What are some tips that you have for people, like especially women, to actually to aspire to be successful? Like you've kind of laid out what you've been through, right? And people don't always see that, where we started from.
Right, right.
And you know, they're like, oh man, she's got it all together. And I would say that, and you probably say you don't.
I don't. Yes.
But,
yes.
But what are some things, like what are some tips that you would give folks to say, hey, look, you know, if you do this, and this, it'll get you to where you need to be.
Okay. I guess number one is know your passion. And, you know, it's not always really obvious to you. So my passion really is not seniors. My passion is helping people be the best they can be. And I choose to do that in senior living. So just knowing that, I kind of gear my efforts to how do I help them be their best person, not only personally, but within the world of senior living. So know your passion, number one. Number two, I would say be willing to face your fears. I think a lot of times, like people that consider wanting to be an entrepreneur, starting their own business, you have all the fears of what could go wrong and that you're going to be a failure. And I have had those same fears. I still have those moments in my career. And I tell a story of one of my early customers who I had to meet with him monthly. And before that monthly meeting, every single month, I would throw up. The fear of just his approach. He was very nasty. He was very condescending. And in my mind, he had the power and I didn't. But that was because I took away my own power. And then as I grew in my career, I began to see that there's something I can learn from him in every one of these meetings. So I don't have to like all the stuff that surrounds him. Mm-hmm. What's the thing I can learn? And when I look back on that particular person, what I learned was a discipline that I didn't have, because I knew he was going to want to know these 5 or 6 things in every meeting, and they weren't really the way I'm wired to think, but because I knew he wanted those, I prepared religiously, I practiced, and I learned a discipline for presenting to investors and lenders and people of that nature. So I think that's really important. And I think the third thing is for women, and this is a woman-specific thing, is men tend to do a great job networking, do a great job having their buds in their business world, you know, talking business, and are happy for each other's success. And when there's a disagreement or a conflict, they have their disagreement or their conflict and they move on. You know, in my career, I would say that women generally have not been that way, myself included, because you kind of operate within the context that you're in every single day, and you go along with what you see. And actually, when Rick and I started IntegraCare, one of the things I noticed was just his incredible expansive network of friends, business friends, and colleagues, and how they interacted. And yet I had a few women folks that I interacted with business-wise and, you know, business/personal, but it was very limited compared to his. And it really made me start reaching out, not just in senior living, but outside senior living. So, you know, people that are in communications, people that are in healthcare, people that are in financial services. And I have met some incredible females whom I would consider, even though I didn't have a formal mentoring relationship with them, mentors, because I learned so much outside of my world. And it helped me see why Rick has been so successful, because his role is growing our business. He has been able to do that by virtue of those relationships. So as females, I think seeking out organizations that are cross industries, seeking out relationships with people that are not necessarily at your level, but who are leaders, thought leaders, industry leaders, and find a way to be intentional about how those relationships operate. Because now, it's weird, but that probably has been the last, I would say, 7 to 8 years of my career is when I came to that epiphany. And I've enjoyed my work so much more because of it.
Very, very good advice. So that's good stuff. As we end, we usually end with a quote.
Okay.
But I'm gonna throw that back over to you, because I like one of the quotes that you have, because it's very powerful, and there's an extra nugget in there. So I'll let I'll hand that over to you, because what you say here, right?
Right. So in our company, one of the things that we say, and if you were here, you'd hear it often. We say it's a game of inches. And one of the things that I've seen as a leader is we are always looking for that next best thing, and the world is always offering the next program, the next technology, and each time these things are going to revolutionize something. And even though that's true, what we've come to believe is that it's really a game of inches. It's probably 100 different things that we're doing to make it a good place to work, and 100 different things that we're doing in our communities to make them a great place to live. And recognizing that no one of them is going to be the gold, that if we do that every single time, we're going to be fantastic. The goal really is putting the things in place, having a tangible way of measuring their effectiveness, and being willing to reinvent yourself. And what we do here is we say you have to reinvent every 2 years. So if you're a person that doesn't like change, that's a pretty tough pill to swallow. And it's funny that I am such a believer in it, because many years ago, someone said to me, your perfect attendance program is pretty outdated, because you're rewarding team members for perfect attendance over the course of a year. And they said, you ought to really consider quarterly. And my exact words were, over my dead body. I will never do that. People need to be able to come to work. And I remember being like really ticked that somebody would suggest that. And now here we are, 17 years later, and we reward attendance on a monthly basis. So what that says is you kind of have to be able and willing to reinvent. Now looking at the way we do those things now, I'm proud of that.
Yeah.
But back then, I thought those are for the weak people. Only the weak people would give in and have such a ridiculous standard. So basically, it's the game of inches. It's how you take those inches, keep what works, and make it better, and throw what doesn't out the window, and replace it with something else.
That's great stuff. Well, thanks for being our ray of sunshine
Thank
every
you.
day here, but on our podcast today. Really appreciate all the good tips that you've given us. And that's all for today, folks. We really appreciate you watching. I hope you got a lot out of today. I know I certainly did. Even though I've known you, I got a couple more tips from you.
Thank you.
That's great. And I really do believe for those that listen, you can be that just ray of sunshine. You can believe in people, and it does work.
It
Right?
does,
And,
yes.
And keep after it, folks. We'd really appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button as well as the bell icon down there to get notified when we post next. If you'd like more information, please don't be afraid to reach out. Visit us at centerforvictory.com. And last thing, just to remember, wherever you're at, whatever you're doing, make this your best day yet. See you later.
Bye.